The full moon hung heavy over the Silverstone Pack's sacred grounds, its pale light filtering through ancient pines that had witnessed countless bonding ceremonies. Tonight, the air should have tasted sweet with celebration. Instead, it carried the bitter tang of betrayal. Arya stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, her ivory dress, carefully chosen, lovingly embroidered with moon symbols by her own trembling hands, now felt like a shroud. The pack had gathered in their finest, hundreds of wolves forming concentric rings around the raised platform where fate bonds were meant to be honored. Where her mate, Beta Damien Blackwood, was supposed to claim her before the goddess and their people. But Damien wasn't looking at her. His hand rested possessively on Celeste's waist, the Alpha's daughter, golden-haired and confident, wearing crimson silk that clung to her curves like a second skin. Celeste's smile was triumphant, sharp as a blade between Arya's ribs. I, Damien Blackwood, reject the bond forced upon me by fate. His voice rang clear across the grounds, each word a hammer strike against Arya's heart. I choose strength over weakness. I choose ambition over sentiment. The crowd's collective gasp felt distant, underwater. Arya's wolf whimpered inside her, a wounded creature curling into itself. She was Omega-born, lowest in the hierarchy, and everyone knew it. What she hadn't known was how little that bond had meant to him, how easily he could sever what the moon goddess herself had woven. "Damien, please," her voice cracked, barely audible. The bond is broken." He didn't even meet her eyes as he raised Celeste's wrist to his mouth. "I mark Celeste Silverstone as my chosen mate." His canines sank into Celeste's skin, the metallic scent of blood mixed with ceremonial incense. Celeste threw her head back with a theatrical gasp of pleasure, making sure everyone saw. Everyone understood. The mark bloomed dark against her pale wrist, a brand, a claim, a public declaration. Arya felt the severing like a physical wound. The phantom thread that had connected her to Damien since her 18th birthday snapped, leaving raw emptiness in its wake. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on a nearby pine, bark rough against her palms, focusing on that small pain to anchor herself against the larger one, threatening to drown her. "Pathetic." Celeste's voice dripped with contempt. "Did you really think a beta would settle for Omega trash? You were always just a placeholder until someone worthy came along." Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd, cruel, knowing laughter that confirmed what Arya had always feared. She was nothing here, less than nothing. "The ceremony is concluded." Alpha Silverstone's voice boomed with authority, already moving past her humiliation, as if it were merely an inconvenient footnote. "Let us celebrate the true bonding." Music started, drums and flutes playing traditional mating songs. Wolves began to shift their attention, redirecting toward the feast tables laden with roasted meats and honeyed wine. The rejection was already becoming gossip, entertainment for the pack's rumor mill. Arya forced herself to move, to walk, not run. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction, toward the tree line. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed in front of them. The ivory dress caught on brambles as she pushed deeper into the forest, away from the light and laughter, away from the scent of her former mate claiming another. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care. The wolf inside her was howling, a sound of pure anguish that Arya trapped in her throat. Omegas weren't supposed to make scenes, weren't supposed to challenge their betters, weren't supposed to matter at all. The forest grew denser, moonlight fragmenting through thick canopy. Arya finally stopped in a small clearing where a creek babbled over smooth stones, its sound almost peaceful, almost enough to drown out the screaming in her head. She collapsed beside the water, finally letting the sobs come, great shaking gasps that tore from her chest, releasing hours, years of suppressed pain. Every insult she'd endured as an Omega, every dismissive glance, every moment she'd believed Damien might be different, might see past her rank to who she truly was. All of it came pouring out. Crying alone in the woods, a voice, deep and commanding, cut through her grief. That's how tragedies begin in the old stories. Arya's head snapped up. A man stood at the clearing's edge, and even through her tears she knew immediately he was Alpha. Everything about him radiated power, the way he held himself, the raw authority in his presence, the silver-grey eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark travelling clothes rather than ceremonial dress. His hair was black as raven's wings, pulled back to reveal a face that was all sharp angles and controlled strength. But it was his scent that made her wolf suddenly still, pine and winter storms, and something ancient, something that whispered of power beyond anything she'd encountered. "Forgive the intrusion." He moved closer, stepped silent despite his size. "I was passing through Silverstone territory when I heard the ceremony, and then I heard what happened during it." Shame burned through Arya's grief. Of course he'd heard. The entire pack had witnessed her humiliation. Now even strangers knew how worthless her mate had found her. "I'm sorry you had to see that." She tried to stand to maintain some shred of dignity, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "I'll leave. I shouldn't be this deep in the forest alone." "No." The command in his voice stopped her cold. "You shouldn't apologize for another's cruelty, and you certainly shouldn't leave before I've properly introduced myself." He knelt beside her, bringing himself to her level, a gesture so unexpected from an alpha that Arya's breath caught. Up close, his eyes were even more striking, flecked with gold that caught the moonlight. "I am Constantine Ravenclaw." His words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. "Alpha King of the Northern Territories." The world tilted. Arya's mind struggled to process what he'd just said. Alpha King. The ruler of the largest werewolf kingdom on the continent, commander of a dozen packs, descendant of the first wolves blessed by the moon goddess herself, and he was kneeling in the dirt beside a rejected Omega, looking at her like she mattered. Chapter 2. The King's Claim. Arya scrambled backward, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this was, an unmated Omega alone with the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. Propriety demanded she bow, avert her eyes, make herself small and unobtrusive. But Constantine's hand shot out, catching her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Peace. I mean you no harm." His touch sent electricity racing up her arm. Not the gentle warmth of a mate bond that had been severed, leaving only phantom pain, but something else. Something that made her wolf lift its head with cautious interest despite its wounds. "Your Majesty." Words failed her. What did one say to an Alpha King, especially looking like this, tear-stained and disheveled, dress torn from her flight through the forest? "Constantine." His thumb brushed across her racing pulse. "When we're alone, you may call me Constantine." The intimacy of that offer stole her breath. Alpha Kings didn't invite familiarity with Omegas. They barely acknowledged their existence except as servants or, in rare cases, playthings for their courts. "I don't understand." Arya's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Why are you here? Why are you speaking to me?" "Because I watched a beta publicly humiliate his fated mate to claim social advantage." Constantine's jaw tightened, something dark flashing in those silver eyes. "And because I've seen enough of pack politics to recognize a grave injustice when it unfolds before me." He released her wrist, but didn't move away. The space between them hummed with unspoken tension. "Tell me your name." "Arya." Arya Moonwhisper. She swallowed hard. "Omega of the Silverstone Pack, or I was. I don't know what I am now." "Now you are a wolf who has been freed from an unworthy bond." Constantine stood in one fluid motion, extending his hand to her. "Now you are standing before an Alpha King who would very much like to ensure your former mate understands the magnitude of his mistake." Arya stared at his offered hand, her mind reeling. "I don't... What do you mean? Come with me back to that ceremony." A smile curved his lips, predatory and promising. "Let me show the Silverstone Pack what happens when they discard something precious." "I'm not precious." The words escaped before she could stop them, years of internalized shame making them automatic. "I'm just an Omega. Damien was right to choose someone stronger, someone who could help his position." "Stop." The command in Constantine's voice made her wolf immediately obey, silencing her mid-sentence. He moved closer, invading her space in a way that should have felt threatening, but instead felt protective. "Never speak of yourself that way again. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes in her bonds. Your former mate was too blind and too foolish to see your worth. That's his failure, not yours. Arya's eyes burned with fresh tears, but these felt different. Not the hollow ache of rejection, but something warmer, something that felt dangerously like hope. Why do you care? She had to ask, had to understand. You're the Alpha King. I'm nobody. You're somebody to me. Constantine's hand came up to cup her face, tilting her chin so she had to meet his eyes. From the moment I heard you crying, I knew. The moon goddess brought me through Silverstone territory tonight for a reason. Before Arya could process that statement, before she could ask what he meant, sounds echoed through the forest, wolves searching, calling her name with mocking concern. Little Omega, where did you run off to? Come back, Arya. The party isn't complete without you. Laughter followed the calls. They were hunting her for sport, for entertainment. Her humiliation was the evening's gossip, and they wanted to squeeze every drop of drama from it. Constantine's expression went cold, deadly. Those are your pack members? Yes, shame colored her voice. They're probably looking to, I don't know, make sure I don't do anything dramatic. They're looking to twist the knife deeper. His hand dropped from her face, but his eyes never left hers. Give me permission, Arya. Let me intervene on your behalf. I don't understand what you're offering. Trust. He extended his hand again, and this time Arya saw the mark on his inner wrist, the royal seal of the Ravenclaw line, a crowned wolf beneath 3 stars. Come back with me. Stand beside me. Let me show them that rejecting you was the greatest mistake your former mate will ever make. The searching calls grew closer. Arya could smell them now. Beta Damien's cedar scent, Celeste's cloying perfume, other pack members eager for more drama. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to protect herself from further humiliation. But something in Constantine's eyes held her. Something that whispered of safety and strength, and the possibility of a dignity she'd never known. Arya placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, warm and certain. Good girl. The approval in his voice made her wolf preen despite itself. Now, let's remind the Silverstone pack of whom they're truly dealing with. They emerged from the tree line just as the search party reached the clearing. Damien was at the front, Celeste clinging to his arm, her new mark displayed prominently. Behind them, a dozen pack members clustered with expressions ranging from false concern to barely concealed glee. Arya! Damien's tone dripped with condescending worry. Thank the goddess. We were concerned you might do something foolish in your emotional state. How thoughtful. Constantine's voice cut across the clearing like a blade, stopping everyone in their tracks. To show such concern for a packmate you publicly humiliated less than an hour ago. Every wolf froze. Arya felt the moment they recognized who stood beside her, the shift in posture, the widening of eyes, the sudden spike of fear scent in the air. Alpha King Constantine. Damien's face went pale, his confident swagger evaporating. We didn't know you were in attendance. Clearly. Constantine's tone could have frozen fire. Otherwise, you might have thought twice before violating sacred ceremony with such crass ambition. Celeste's grip on Damien's arm tightened, her earlier triumph curdling into uncertainty. Your Majesty, you misunderstand. Damien simply chose his true mate over a forced bond. That's his right under pack law. Is it? Constantine's smile was razor-sharp. How interesting that you believe pack law supersedes the moon goddess's will. I wasn't aware the Silverstone pack had elevated itself above divine authority. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. No one dared breathe. Constantine turned to Arya, his expression softening. This Beta, this woman, are these the wolves who made you feel worthless? Arya's voice stuck in her throat. Years of Omega conditioning screamed at her to defer, to minimize, to protect her betters from consequences. But Constantine's steady presence beside her, his hand still holding hers, gave her courage she didn't know she possessed. Yes, the word came out stronger than she expected. They are. Then let me make something very clear to everyone present. Constantine's alpha command rolled out like thunder, forcing every wolf to their knees through sheer dominance. Only Arya remained standing, protected by his will. Arya Moonwhisper is under my personal protection as of this moment. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any harm done to her will be answered by the full weight of the Northern Crown. Chapter 3. Sanctuary in Silver. The journey to the Ravenclaw Palace took 3 days, and with each passing mile, Arya felt the choking grip of her old life loosening. Constantine had taken her from Silverstone territory that very night, not even allowing her to return to her small Omega quarters for belongings. "Anything you need, you'll have," he'd said, and his tone brooked no argument. They traveled with a small escort, 4 elite guards who treated Arya with a respect she'd never experienced. No sneers, no dismissive glances, no casual cruelty, just professional courtesy, and when she caught them off guard, expressions of genuine sympathy for what she'd endured. Constantine rode beside her, patient with her inexperience on horseback, his presence a constant reassurance against the anxiety gnawing at her ribs. Because with each mile reality was settling in. She'd left her pack. She was traveling with the Alpha King, and she had absolutely no idea what came next. "You're quiet," Constantine observed, as they crested a hill overlooking a vast silver forest, the trees shimmering in afternoon light. "Regrets already?" "Confusion," Arya admitted. "I don't understand what I'm doing here, what you want from me." He reined his horse to a stop, studying her with those penetrating silver eyes. "What do you think I want?" Heat crept up her neck. A dozen possibilities flashed through her mind, each more troubling than the last. Powerful alphas didn't help Omegas out of pure altruism. There was always a price, always an expectation. "I don't know," she said carefully. "That's what scares me." Constantine dismounted in one smooth motion, then moved to help her down. His hands on her waist were steady, supportive, and he held her gaze as her feet touched the ground. "I want you to heal," he said simply. "I want you to remember that you're more than what your pack told you. And then, when you're ready, I want to properly court you." Arya's breath caught. "Court me, but I'm Omega-born. Yes, I'm aware." His thumb traced along her jaw, the touch sending shivers down her spine. "I'm also aware that the mate bond you had was shallow and unworthy, and I'm very aware that what I feel when I look at you has nothing to do with hierarchy and everything to do with something far more primal." "The moon goddess doesn't give second bonds," Arya whispered, voicing the fear that had been building since he'd first touched her. "What we have, whatever this is, it isn't fate." "No." Constantine's smile was soft, almost tender. "It's choice, which makes it more powerful than any bond forced upon us by destiny." Before she could respond, one of the guards called out, "Your Majesty." "The palace is in view." The Ravenclaw Palace rose from the silver forest like something from a dream. Towers of white stone reached toward the sky, their peaks crowned with moonstone that glowed even in daylight. Gardens terraced down the hillside, filled with night-blooming flowers that perfumed the air with jasmine and moonflower. Everything spoke of power, yes, but also of grace and ancient beauty. Arya's wolf stirred with wonder. This was what a true pack stronghold should be. Not the harsh militarism of Silverstone territory, but a place where strength and beauty existed in harmony. "Welcome home," Constantine murmured, so quietly only she could hear. Home. The word felt foreign, dangerous. Arya had never had a home, not really. Just places where she was tolerated, spaces she was allowed to occupy as long as she remained invisible and useful. The palace staff greeted them with organized efficiency. Servants bowed deeply to Constantine, but Arya noticed their eyes flicking to her with open curiosity rather than disdain. News of the Alpha King bringing home a rejected Omega must have preceded them. "Lady Arya will be staying in the Moon Wing," Constantine announced, his hand resting proprietarily on the small of her back. "She is to be treated with the respect due to a royal guest. Anyone who forgets this will answer to me personally." An older woman with silver-streaked hair stepped forward, her bearing regal despite the servant's dress she wore. "Of course, Your Majesty. I am Helena, head of the household. It will be my honor to attend to Lady Arya's needs." Lady Arya. She'd never been called Lady anything in her life. Helena's smile was warm, genuine. "Come, my dear. Let's get you settled and properly fed. You look exhausted. Constantine caught Arya's hand before she could follow Helena. I have council business to attend to, but I'll see you at dinner tonight. If you need anything before then, anything at all, tell Helena. She has my complete trust. Thank you, Arya managed, overwhelmed by the strange new reality she'd stepped into. For everything. His fingers squeezed hers gently. You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Arya, but you're welcome nonetheless. The Moonwing was aptly named. Arya's quarters overlooked gardens, where night-blooming flowers were beginning to open for evening, and through the open windows came the scent of jasmine and distant pine. The rooms themselves were larger than her entire Omega dwelling back in Silverstone, a bedroom with a bed big enough for 5 people, a sitting area with plush furniture, a bathing room with a tub carved from a single piece of marble. The Alpha King chose these rooms personally, Helena said, directing servants who brought in clothing, toiletries, everything Arya could possibly need. They belonged to his mother before she passed. He hasn't allowed anyone to occupy them since. The weight of that gesture settled over Arya. I don't deserve this. Helena turned, her expression firm but kind. My dear, I've served the Ravenclaw family for 40 years. I've seen Alpha Constantine grow from a serious child into a powerful king. And in all that time, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you today. He barely knows me. Perhaps. Helena began filling the bath with steaming water, scented with lavender and sage. Or perhaps he sees what others missed. Now let's get you cleaned up. Dinner with the Alpha King requires proper presentation. The bath was pure luxury. Arya sank into the hot water, feeling 3 days of travel and years of tension slowly dissolving. Helena left her alone with soft instructions to ring if she needed anything, and for the first time since the rejection ceremony, Arya allowed herself to simply exist without fear or shame. Her hand drifted to her chest, where the phantom pain of the severed mate bond had dulled to a distant ache. Damien had been her first love, her hope for a better future, and he discarded her like trash in front of everyone she knew. But Constantine had caught her when she fell, not because he had to, not because of any bond or obligation, but because he chose to. Choice, he'd said, more powerful than fate. Maybe he was right. Arya dressed for dinner in a gown Helena had left, deep midnight blue that brought out her eyes, fitted to emphasize her curves without being inappropriate. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Not the shabby Omega in cast-off clothing, but someone who might actually belong in a palace. Constantine was waiting in the private dining hall, and when he saw her, something raw and hungry flashed in his eyes before he controlled it. Beautiful, he said simply, offering his arm. Though you would be in anything. Dinner was intimate. Just the two of them in a candlelit room with windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. The food was exquisite, but Arya barely tasted it, too aware of Constantine's presence across the table, the way his eyes never left her for long. Tell me about yourself, he said over wine that tasted of summer berries, not the Pax version, your version. So Arya talked, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. About growing up Omega, about the small rebellions she'd managed, learning to read when most Omegas were kept illiterate, sneaking into training sessions to watch the warriors, dreaming of a life beyond subservience. About meeting Damien and believing for one shining moment that the mate bond might lift her above her rank. Constantine listened with complete attention, his expression darkening when she described the casual cruelties, softening when she shared her secret dreams. You wanted to be a healer, he said when she finished, to help your pack, despite how they treated you. Stupid, I know. Noble. His hand found hers across the table, and entirely in character for someone with your strength. I'm not strong. I let them break me. You survived them. Constantine's grip tightened. That took more strength than they'll ever possess. And now you're here, beginning again. That takes even more. Chapter 4. The Alpha King's Truth. 3 weeks passed in the Ravenclaw Palace like a dream Arya kept expecting to end. But each morning she woke in the luxurious Moonwing. Each day, Helena fussed over her like a beloved daughter. And each evening, Constantine courted her with a patience and gentleness that slowly rebuilt what Damien had shattered. He showed her the palace libraries, vast rooms filled with books she was encouraged to read. He walked with her through gardens, where rare wolfsage bloomed only under moonlight. He introduced her to his council with respect, making it clear she was under his protection and favor. And through it all he touched her with reverence, hand at her back, fingers brushing hers, presence constant but never demanding. The palace staff quickly accepted her. Even the nobles who visited treated her with cautious respect, understanding that insulting Constantine's guest was career suicide. Arya began to breathe easier, to walk with her head up, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life beyond shame and servitude. But questions gnawed at her. Why was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories courting a rejected Omega? What did he truly want? And most troubling, what happened when this fairy tale inevitably ended? The answer came on the night of the harvest moon, when Constantine invited her to the palace's sacred grove for the monthly honoring ceremony. The grove was ancient, ringed by stones carved with runes that predated recorded history. Pack members gathered in ceremonial dress, their faces solemn as they prepared to honor the moon goddess. Constantine stood at the center, magnificent in formal regalia, black and silver that echoed his kingdom's colors, the royal seal prominent on his chest. When Arya entered the grove, his eyes found her immediately, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. The ceremony began with traditional songs, wolves raising their voices in harmonies that seemed to resonate with the stones themselves. Then came the honoring, each wolf approaching the altar to leave offerings and speak private prayers to the goddess. When Constantine's turn came, he didn't approach the altar alone. He extended his hand to Arya. Confusion flooded through her, along with a spike of anxiety. This wasn't protocol. Omegas didn't participate in sacred ceremonies at this level, didn't stand beside Alpha Kings before the goddess. But Constantine's expression left no room for argument. She took his hand. At the altar, he produced something that made the assembled wolves gasp. A silver pendant bearing the Ravenclaw seal, worked into a delicate necklace clearly meant for wearing close to the heart. "Moon Goddess," Constantine's voice rang clear through the grove, "I come before you to declare my intention. I, Constantine Ravenclaw, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, formally request your blessing to court Arya Moonwhisper with the intent of making her my queen and mate." Shock rippled through the crowd, through Arya. Her mind couldn't process what he'd just said, what he was proposing in front of his entire pack and the goddess herself. "She comes to me not through fate's mandate but through choice," Constantine continued, his grip on her hand steady despite the trembling that had seized her. "She has known rejection and risen from it. She has known cruelty and remained kind. She has known shame and maintained dignity. These qualities make her worthy not just of my court, but of my crown." He turned to face her fully, and in his eyes Arya saw complete certainty. No doubt, no hesitation, just pure determination and something deeper that made her heart race. "I know I've moved fast," he said quietly, meant only for her. "I know you need time to heal, to learn to trust again. But I wanted you to know my intentions, to understand that this isn't a game or a passing fancy. From the moment I saw you in that forest, something in me recognized something in you. Not a mate bond. You're right, the goddess doesn't grant those twice, but something rarer, something chosen." "Constantine, Her voice broke. "I'm nobody. I can't be a queen." "You're Arya." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "That's all you need to be. The rest, the strength, the grace, the wisdom, you already possess. You just need time to see it in yourself." The pendant gleamed in the moonlight, its significance impossible to ignore. This was a formal courtship declaration witnessed by the pack and the goddess. If she accepted it, she was accepting everything it represented: the courtship, the potential future, the terrifying possibility of happiness. What if I'm not strong enough? The fear that had haunted her for weeks finally escaped. What if I fail you, fail your pack? Then we'll face it together. Constantine's smile was soft, achingly gentle. That's what mates do, true mates, chosen ones. They don't require perfection. They offer partnership. Arya's hand trembled as she reached for the pendant. The moment her fingers closed around it, warmth spread through her chest, not the electric snap of a mate bond, but something steadier, deeper, like coming home after a long journey through darkness. Constantine fastened it around her neck, the silver settling against her heart. Then, in front of everyone, he kissed her forehead with such tender reverence that fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Take all the time you need," he whispered against her skin. "I'm not going anywhere." The pack erupted in cheers, celebrating their Alpha King's choice. And in that moment, surrounded by acceptance instead of mockery, honored instead of humiliated, Arya felt something shift inside her. The broken pieces Damien had left behind began to knit together, not into what they were before, but into something new, something stronger. She'd been rejected by a mate who saw only her rank. Now she was chosen by a king who saw her soul. And as Constantine drew her into his arms, holding her like something precious, while the harvest moon blessed them with silver light, Arya finally understood what the old stories meant when they spoke of finding home not in places, but in people. "Thank you," she breathed against his chest, "for seeing me when everyone else looked through me." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for having the courage to let me." The celebration continued around them. Music, laughter, joy that felt genuine rather than mocking. And for the first time in her life, Arya allowed herself to believe in happy endings, not because fate demanded it, but because she and Constantine had chosen to create one together.